In the Kingdom of Babylon around the year 600 BC, an outstanding work of architecture could be found, which would be known as the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Its edification was motivated by the love of King Nebuchadnezzar II for the princess Amytis of Media. The Babylonian king had unified the kingdoms of Babylon and Media, and after achieving his conquests, he returned home with Princess Amytis as his wife. Some accounts affirm that Amytis missed the mountains of Media, which were covered by the most beautiful plants. But Babylon was a great plain, and its horizon was rather dull. Noticing his queen's dismayed nostalgia, the Babylonian king ordered the construction of an outstanding work of engineering. The great building then started, and a great pyramid of steps was edified, in which terraces were supported by beautiful columns. These terraces had an endless array of plants from everywhere. The garden was full of fruit trees and flowers of all colors. That construction was a source of amazement for all those who visited the capital of the Babylonian Empire. And Princess Amytis, while contemplating such a marvelous garden, built by her husband, could feel her native land once more. Such a luxurious effort was only possible due to the economic power of the Kingdom of Babylon, which was the wealthiest nation of its era. Although several historical accounts confirm the existence of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, the subject is still controversial due to the lack of Babylonian documents that prove its existence, and also the lack of archaeological findings. Little is known about what dictated the end of the imposing gardens. The number one hypothesis is earthquakes. Although this great work has vanished, the story of the beautiful Hanging Gardens, the fruit of the love between the king of Babylon and his queen, is still part of the folklore of current and future generations. Zeus, the supreme god of Greek mythology, has always been worshipped by all the Hellenic peoples. Given his paramount role in the Greek pantheon, several temples were edified in his honor. But none could match the temple at Olympia, where the magnificent statue of Zeus was kept. This statue depicted Zeus sitting on his throne, with a height of more than 13 meters. This gigantic statue was made of ebony, gold, and ivory, ornamented with gems. The statue was carved by Phidias, a remarkable Greek sculptor. He also crafted another massive statue, which represented the goddess Athena, located in the Athenian Acropolis, next to the Parthenon. The statue of Zeus held the image of the goddess of victory in one of its hands, and this deity was always alongside Zeus. In his other hand, Zeus held a scepter with an eagle resting on its top. The eagle is the animal consecrated to the Lord of the Olympian gods. The Temple of Zeus in Olympia was a pilgrimage site. Thousands of Greeks traveled to the city to attend religious rituals. But many also arrived in Athens to attend the Olympic Games, which were disputed in the same period of the religious ceremonies in honor of the great god. During the period when Greece was dominated by Rome, Emperor Caligula ordered the dismantlement of the statue so that it could be brought to Rome. Zeus's head would then be replaced by the emperor's. But the statue managed to escape unscathed, since Caligula was killed before his order could be accomplished. Over the centuries, the festivities in honor of Zeus became less important with the emergence of Christianity, and the sanctuary of Zeus fell into decay. At the end of the 4th century of the Common Era, the Roman Emperor Theodosius declared Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire, and pagan practices started to be persecuted. The Temple of Zeus was now regarded as an epicenter of paganism and was permanently closed. The fate of the statue is still debated by experts. Some argue that it was dismantled and taken to Constantinople, where it was destroyed in a major fire, while others claim that it was pillaged and its precious ornaments were robbed. The remainder of the statue collapsed along with the temple. The great statue of Zeus, sculpted by Phidias, was an inspiration for several other Roman sculptors who carved statues of Jupiter, the Roman counterpart of Zeus. But none was as breathtaking as the glorious statue of Zeus in Olympia.
The temple dedicated to the goddess Artemis in Ephesus was regarded as the ancient world's largest temple. The goddess Artemis was a divinity related to hunting, wildlife, and also a lunar deity. Artemis was deeply worshipped in the Greek world, and her temples were spread throughout the Hellenic world, but the majestic Ephesian temple had no match. Located in Asia Minor, the city of Ephesus is nowadays part of Turkey, and this city had one of the most prosperous seaports of ancient times. The temple was edified in the same place where older temples had once been built. Among them was a temple founded by the Amazons, honoring the goddess Artemis, the patron goddess of women warriors. But the temple's edification started only in 550 BC, which would later become one of the wonders of the world. The temple was completed after 10 years. It was fully built in marble and ornamented with precious metals. The outlandish temple was 113 meters long, 43 meters wide, and 13 meters high. It became a pilgrimage site for believers, and it also attracted tourists from the ancient world. But in 356 BC, the temple suffered an attack. A man who wanted his name to be remembered for eternity premeditated the fire that would destroy the temple of Artemis. The magistrates decided that the arsonist's name could not be a part of history, but the criminal's identity is known today. Nevertheless, I refuse to mention the name who committed such a vile crime only to be famous. That would be to reward him for his crime. Legends affirm that the fire only occurred because Artemis had turned her attention to Macedonia, since on the very same day of the fire, the baby who would one day be known as Alexander the Great was born. Many years later, Alexander ordered the reconstruction of the goddess's temple. The temple of Artemis survived for many years, even enduring the fire set by the Goths, after which the temple was restored again. But it ended up being definitively closed after the pagan persecution by the Christians. The temple's fate remains unknown. However, part of its marble blocks was used for the construction of the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople. Although lost in time, Antipater of Sidon, who is credited with creating the list of wonders of the world, said that all other wonders lost their brightness when he admired the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus is the less popular of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The Great Mausoleum was built in the city of Halicarnassus, then the capital of the kingdom of Caria, which was satrap of the Persian Empire, located in modern Turkey. In 353 BC, the satrap Mausolus ordered the edification of a great monument that would house the ruler's tomb after his death. The best Greek architects, masons, and artists were hired for the construction of Mausolus's pharaonic tomb. The satrap Mausolus died already during the first year of the mausoleum construction, but his wife, Artemisia, ordered the works to proceed in order to honor her husband. Built on a hill, the mausoleum stands 45 meters high and was lined in the best white marble. The building was ornamented with sculptures in high relief depicting the Centauromachi, the clash between Lapids and centaurs, and also the Amazonomachi, which was the struggle between the legendary king Theseus of Athens against the Amazons. Dozens of statues were found across the building's platform, and 36 Ionic columns, 12 meters high, decorated the terrace. There was a massive statue of a chariot at the top, a 4-horse chariot driven by Mausolus and his wife Artemis by his side. An underground chamber was built to shelter the remains of Mausolus and his wife, which were deposited alongside their jewels and treasures. Then, the tomb was sealed to prevent any form of looting. The Great Mausoleum of Halicarnassus became a major attraction in the region, almost mandatory for ancient time travelers who passed nearby. the majestic mausoleum collapsed due to a major earthquake more than 1,000 years after its construction. The Crusaders, who occupied the area around the 15th century, used part of the mausoleum's massive blocks to strengthen the structure of the Bodrum Castle. Nowadays, it is possible to visit the archaeological site of the ruins that were once the great Mausoleum of Halicarnassus. Among the many cities founded by Alexander the Great, which bear his name, the Egyptian city of Alexandria is certainly the most well-known. Located at the mouth of the Nile River, the city grew and flourished, turning itself into one of the most prosperous Mediterranean cities. Its port became one of the key trade hubs of the ancient world. After Alexander's death, the Macedonian dominions were disputed by his senior officers. The Macedonian general Ptolemy established himself as the ruler of Egypt, and the Ptolemaic dynasty started. As an Egyptian pharaoh, Ptolemy ordered the construction of a massive lighthouse on the small island of Pharos. This colossal structure would be known as the Lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. The building had a tower height of about 130 meters, something remarkable for that time. The Lighthouse of Alexandria was one of the tallest structures in the ancient world. The construction took 12 years to be completed. Made with blocks of white granite and marble, it marveled the sailors from distant lands who docked at the port. There was a pyre at the top that burned uninterruptedly. Its flame shone at night and could be seen from a distance of more than 40 kilometers. There was also a statue of Poseidon at the top of the lighthouse, the king of the seas, a deity greatly revered by Hellenic sailors. First owned by the government of Alexandria, it later became a Roman and Arab possession. But the lighthouse continued to stand out on the Alexandrian coast for over 1,000 years. However, several earthquakes shook the lighthouse's structure, and in 1480, the lighthouse was already totally destroyed. Taking advantage of its strategic position, the Sultan Mamluk ordered the construction of a great fortress to defend the port of Alexandria. In 1994, an expedition of maritime archaeologists found the submerged ruins of the Lighthouse of Alexandria. In 2015, the Egyptian government approved a plan to rebuild the lighthouse and flourish tourism in a city that was once one of the most visited in the world. The Colossus of Rhodes was a gargantuan bronze statue built near the entrance of the city of Rhodes. The colossal statue depicted the titan Helios, who was a sun deity of Greek mythology. Its construction happened after a massive military success. The citizens of Rhodes fought against the Macedonian domination, which had established an isolating blockade around the island of Rhodes. The Macedonian invaders tried to siege and subjugate the population of Rhodes to conquer them. The Macedonians invested a fortune in siege equipment, but to no avail. With the support provided by the pharaoh Ptolemy of Egypt, Rhodes endured the siege and expelled the Macedonians. During their retreat, the invaders left a fortune in war equipment, then was promptly sold by the Rhodes government, and the money was used to build a colossal statue of Helios, the city's patron god. In 292 BC, the Colossus's construction began on top of a 15-meter marble pedestal. The statue had a stone-filled brass structure, but its lining was made of iron and bronze. Most of these metals had once been weapons, shields, and armor of the Macedonian army. After 12 years, the statue was ready, and the Colossus of Rhodes, about 30 meters high, stunned the sailors from distant lands as they approached the port of Rhodes. The precise location of the statue and its stance are still a matter of debate between experts, Yet, regardless of its stance and location, the Colossus of Rhodes was indeed an imposing edification. Nonetheless, the gigantic statue collapsed after a powerful earthquake in 226 BC. The ruins were so massive that people visited Rhodes just to see the fallen Colossus. In 653, when the island of Rhodes was under Arab domination, the Caliph ordered the dismantling of the Colossus's ruins and its metals were sold. After that, the Colossus of Rhodes was confined to people's imagination. Like the Lighthouse of Alexandria, there are now plans to rebuild the splendid Colossus in honor of the sun god. The new Colossus is envisioned to measure something between 120 and 150 meters of height, 5 times greater than the original one, and it will cost close to $300 million. The new Colossus is expected to have the same impact as its predecessor, which could amaze all those who saw it for the first time. Among the wonders of the ancient world, the pyramids of Giza are undoubtedly the #1 source of curiosity and fascination. As foretold by the name, they are located in Giza, currently Egypt's 3rd largest city, on the western bank of the Nile, very close to the city of Cairo, the country's capital. Located in the necropolis of Giza, the Great Pyramids stand out in the landscape. The archaeological complex has several pyramids, but 3 of them stand out the most. The Pyramid of Cheops is the tallest with 146 meters. The Pyramid of Khafra comes second with 143 meters, while the Pyramid of Menkaure is the smallest, measuring 66 meters. These massive buildings were edified as an eternal resting place for the remains of the great pharaohs of ancient Egypt. The pyramids' construction occurred around 2500 BC, and they were a symbol of the apex of the era of great Egyptian constructions. The Pyramid of Cheops required about 300,000 stone blocks, with 2 tons each. In order to carry out such an effort, more than 30,000 Egyptians worked in the most varied activities. In addition to the workers who performed the manual tasks, architects, doctors, and artists also worked on the construction site. Contrary to what had once been the most common opinion, these colossal works were not built by slaves, but by free men for the most part, and they took 200 years to be completed. The pyramids were built with 4 different types of stones: alabaster, basalt, granite, and limestone. The majority of the material for the pyramid's construction came from distant quarries brought from ships sailing the Nile. Several hypotheses attempt to explain how the ancient Egyptians were able to build a work of that magnitude with such primitive technologies. That mystery is a fertile ground for all kinds of far-fetched ideas, including the theory that the pyramids were built by aliens. To conceive that such a work could only be an extraterrestrial effort is to underestimate the human capacity to invent solutions to all sorts of issues. After their completion, the pyramids of Giza were quite different from what we were accustomed to, since they were lined by polished limestone. The brightness of the white limestone pyramids could be spotted from afar. However, over the centuries, this coating was removed from the pyramids and served other purposes. Likewise, the treasures, which had surely been buried with the pharaohs, disappeared as well. Next to the pyramids, there is a large stone sphinx, carved to protect the necropolis. It is the world's largest statue, made from a single stone only. The Pyramid of Cheops was considered the highest man-made building until the construction of the Lincoln Cathedral in England in 1311. In the 10th century, the son of the Sultan Saladin attempted to destroy the pyramids as he deemed them to be worship symbols. Even though he spent great resources, his effort only caused minimal damage to the pyramids. The pyramids of Giza are the only constructions that remain standing among all the 7 wonders of the ancient world. They are one of the most visited tourist points in the world. An old Arab proverb says, "Time laughs at all things, but pyramids laugh at time."
Chichen Itza was a pre-Columbian city built by the Mayans. It is located on the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The archaeological site is especially known for its fascinating and diversified architecture, which shows many aspects of the Mayan culture, its brilliant ingenuity, besides being a true economic power and capital for the civilization. Getting to know this site is a walk through the history of one of the most brilliant civilizations that ever existed. The Mayans, over time, also lived elsewhere, but Chichen Itza is the most famous of its cities. One of the best known points of the archaeological site, and its greatest attraction, is the Kukulkan Pyramid. Kukulkan was the name of the serpent god. This site was built in the 12th century BC and lies in the center of Chichen Itza. The structure is over 30 meters long, 26 belong to the platform, and 4 to a temple located at the top of the pyramid, to which we arrive through staircases that surround all sides of the construction. Each one of them is formed by 91 steps. Curiously, at the entrance of the temple, there is only one step, and adding each set of 91 with this single step, we have the number 365, which represents the solar calendar of the Mayan civilization, called Hab, with 18 months of 20 days each. On the sides, we find 52 rectangles symbolizing the weeks of the year, and 2 equinoxes. In fact, in this same place, during the spring and autumn equinoxes in March and September, there is a projection of lights and shadows in triangular reflections that form the image of a snake that seems to climb the stairs to the top of the pyramid. Another interesting feature of this construction is that when someone claps in front of the staircase, the sound of the applause is distorted and echoes like the song of the quetzal bird, typical of the tropical areas of Central America. In mid-1930, an expedition was made in the pyramid, and an axis was discovered to a temple that lies below the one situated at the top. Inside it, a chamber with a statue of the god Chakmul and a jaguar-shaped throne were found. In Chichen Itza, there is also a place where the Mayans practiced chalachli, known as ball game. The field measured 168 meters by 70 meters. The players had to make a ball and pass it between rims placed on either side of the field. However, the balls could not be touched with their hands, and so the players used other parts of the body, such as shoulders and elbows. Some say they also used their knees, and that the defeated team was sacrificed. The Temple of Warriors is another highlight of this archaeological site. This ruin is surrounded by the Plaza of the 1,000 Columns, a beautiful environment formed by incredible 1,000 columns in a row. The Temple of Warriors has a rectangular shape and a large staircase that leads to the top, where there are more columns. There is also a Chakmul, the name given to the status of the pre-Columbian Mesoamerican stone. There is also El Caracol, or the Observatory, a space that the Mayans used to make astronomical observations. The name El Caracol refers to a spiral staircase located inside the tower. There is also the Temple of the Bearded Man, a smaller structure compared to the other large monuments. In these ruins, what attracts more attention are images in low relief. One of them looks like a man with a beard, which justifies the name given to the temple. Nowadays, Chichen Itza is one of the most sought-after destinations in Mexico, and receives about 1.4 million tourists each year. Due to its enormous architecture and great historical importance, it is one of the most incredible archaeological sites in the world. The Great Wall of China is one of the best known monuments in the world and is the most extensive structure ever created by man. The massive fortification, which in Chinese is called Changcheng or Long Wall, is located in northern China, and due to its historical, cultural, and architectural worth, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site since 1987. This tourist attraction lures in people from all over the world and every year welcomes between 15 and 16 million visitors. Hence, it's one of the most sought-after destinations in Asia and also China's main symbol. The history of its lengthy construction, which lasted more than 2,000 years, began in 215 BC. The final parts of its structure were completed only between 1368 and 1644. The work started during the reign of Emperor Qin Shi Huang from 221 and 207 BC, and then continued in subsequent dynasties such as the Han and Ming dynasties. The fortification had military objectives, such as protecting the Chinese Empire from nomadic invaders like the Mongols, controlling borders, immigration, and migration, while also being important in trading matters involving other regions of Asia and some African localities, which made the Great Wall an important trade route. Besides these, another important factor is the construction of the Great Wall of China generated jobs for the country, since it demanded a considerable labor force. This extensive structure runs from Jiayuguan in Gansu Province to the mouth of the Yalujiang River in Liaoning Province. In 2008, it was estimated that the wall had a length of 8,850 kilometers, but recent studies have shown that the building has a total of 21,196 kilometers, being 7 meters high and 6 meters wide. And some historians believe that the structure has already had a remarkable 22,000 kilometers of extension. The Great Wall of China is not a single wall, but several, built in different locations and different historical periods and generations. Various materials were used, such as stones, some weighing up to a ton, granite, wood, bricks, and others. These varied according to the resources available in the region where the construction was being made. Besides these different materials, techniques also varied depending on the era. Its structure also has doors. Shanhai, Juyong, and Nianzi stand out, as well as towers and forts, which had strategic purposes. Studies indicate that there are about 40,000 towers along the fortification. They were used for soldiers to monitor the approach of enemies and also served as a shelter. Stables were built at the bottom of these structures to keep animals and objects. As the distance between them is varied, the soldiers who stayed in different towers used smoke signals or black and white flags to communicate with each other and maintain the region's security. The forts also had strategic purposes and were made up of gates, stairs, and ramps made for the cavalry. It is estimated that at least 2 million workers participated in it between peasants, soldiers, slaves, and also prisoners. A significant number of these builders died during the works due to low temperatures and inadequate food supplies. Some even say that several bodies were buried in the middle of the walls or the surroundings. The wall managed to defend parts of China from invaders for centuries, but failed to stop the Mongols. Genghis Khan's descendants ended up dominating China. Around 1677, the Emperor Kangxi declared the end of the wall's maintenance efforts and expansion activities, since it no longer made sense. Albeit its magnificence, with the passing of the years, some of its parts have crumbled. To preserve them, some restoration works have already been done in parts of its structure. For its greatness, the Century magazine once said that the Great Wall could be seen from the moon with the naked eye. But this has been debunked. Indeed, it cannot be seen from space, but the Great Wall of China is one of the most famous and imposing places of our planet. Besides its magnificence, the landscape surrounding it is deeply beautiful, which makes the visit to the place even more enchanting. That is why the Great Wall of China has achieved a prominent place among the 7 wonders of the modern world. Petra is a historic city in the south of Jordan, in the Middle East. It is currently the most visited tourist destination in the country. In December 1985, it was recognized as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, and today it is part of the 7 wonders of the modern world. The city, which is more than 2,000 years old, is characterized by its constructions carved in a type of rock called sandstone, made by the Nabateans, an Arabic ancestral people who colonized this region in 312 BC. They also gave the name Petra to the city, but before that, many things happened during its millenary history, and different peoples inhabited the region. Apparently, the Hurrites were there until 1200 BC, in the Iron Age period, when the Edomites occupied the place. During that period, the city was called Iran. However, these people began to migrate to southern Palestine. The Nabateans arrived on the site in 321 BC, and gradually settled down permanently. The Nabateans made the city their capital, and led it to great commercial successes, with routes to various countries such as China, India, Egypt, and others. During this time they were in the region, Petra also stood out for its remarkable hydraulic systems. The Nabateans also made other constructions in the territory, especially sculptures made directly on the rocks. This technical sophistication resulted in an architecture that continues to impress us. The Nabateans inhabited the region for centuries. However, between 64 and 63 BC, Petra was annexed by the Roman Empire under the command of General Pompey. Petra continued to prosper under Roman rule, which also left its mark on some of the region's buildings. In addition, the city also passed through the hands of the Byzantines. Another important aspect of the history of this incredible place is that over time, the city faced 2 strong earthquakes, the second very devastating. After that, many parts of the city were destroyed. Luckily, a large number of ruins remain, and to this day, those who visit the site can also see temples, tombs, houses, and other incredible monuments sculpted into rocks and scattered in a beautiful landscape, composed of an immensity of sand and huge rocks. Although it is an incredibly old place, occupied by different civilizations over time, the city fell into oblivion for a long period. Only in 1812, through the Swiss explorer Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, did Petra begin to attract the world's attention again, visited by historians, archaeologists, and others interested in its historical wealth and fascinating architecture. Petra's most prominent monument is the Al-Khazne, or temple, or treasury chamber, a large 40-meter-high facade carved by the Romans, which nobody knows for sure what it was built for. Some people think it was a mausoleum or crypt. Another famous spot is Ad-Ir, or monastery, which has a very beautiful facade with a grandiose architecture. To get there, we need to climb a staircase of 800 steps. Besides these places, there are several other interesting sites in this archaeological location. For example, the royal tombs, such as the urn tomb and the palace tomb, where evidence of religious ceremonies and other rituals have been found. There is also the amphitheater left by the Romans and made for 7,000 people. It is one of Petra's most famous spots. The archaeological site of Petra became more famous for being the setting for the new adventures of Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, increasing tourism in this region. Nowadays, thousands of visitors visit the city of Petra and marvel at the great monuments carved in the rocks. Machu Picchu is a city of the ancient Inca civilization, built in the 15th century by the order of Emperor Pachacuti, one of the most important rulers of this people. In 1983, UNESCO declared it a World Heritage Site, and in 2007, the ancient Inca city was considered one of the wonders of the modern world, representing Latin America alongside Christ the Redeemer. Machu Picchu, which means Old Mountain, is located in the Andes in the Urubamba River Valley, Peru. It is a place surrounded by mountains at 2,400 meters of altitude and only 130 kilometers from Cusco, the former capital of the Incas. Although there are records that the site was known since mid-1860, and even some records about Machu Picchu, the city was officially discovered in 1911 by Hiram Bingham, an American historian and professor at Yale University, during an expedition in Peru in search of an ancient capital called Vilcabamba, where the descendants of the Incas would have taken refuge. After Bingham's arrival in Machu Picchu, the place became known and valued worldwide. He himself returned several times to new exploration and research efforts. Since then, the site has been widely explored and studied. Countless objects have been found, such as knives, vases, earrings, among other things, which made it possible to get to know the civilization better. Many of these artifacts were sent to the United States, the country where Hiram Bingham lived. These pieces remained there for many years, until in 2008, the Peruvian government sued Yale University, claiming that the objects should return to Peru. The dispute lasted some time, and finally, in 2010, the United States decided to send part of the artifacts to the Latin American country. The Inca city is 530 meters long and 200 meters wide. Its structure is divided into an agricultural and an urban part, and these two areas are divided by a moat, a staircase, and a wall. When it was discovered, only 30% of the original structure was left, but since then, there have been several reconstructions. In the urban ruins, there are traces of various places, such as houses, squares, cemeteries, sanctuaries, and also a sundial, or in the Quechua language, Intihuatana, which means place where the sun gets tied. This clock is in the highest part of the city and is considered an important sacred point of the Incan city. Related to the calendar of these people, following the movement of the sun, the shadow projected over different points of the artifact. In general, this calendar was associated with astronomical observations such as seasons, the passage of time, and also weather conditions. As far as we know, the Incas had remarkable astronomical knowledge. Another sacred place linked to the religious context is the Temple of the Sun, a circular space. This place was especially dedicated to the solar god, divinity of this civilization, where ceremonies, sacrifices, and offerings took place in this temple. In general, the Incas paid various tributes to the elements of nature, much valued by their civilization. For this reason, there were several temples, such as the Temple of the Moon, the Temple of the Three Windows, and the main temple. In the agricultural chapter, there were terraces for plantations and new environments where food was stored. In this agricultural zone, an important point is the funerary rock, which marks the entrance to the city cemetery, which apparently was built to be a sanctuary. It is a rock with some notched steps. Regarding the funeral part, the Incas practiced mummification. Besides the above mentioned, there are other interesting places scattered around Machu Picchu. The ruins also revealed the great capacity of Inca engineers. The city of Machu Picchu was built with stones whose fitting is remarkably precise. We can verify that they were carved to perfection, resulting in a beautiful and schematic architecture. Most of the stones used in the original construction are still firm and intact, having even withstood 2 earthquakes. It is believed that some parts of the Inca city were adorned with gold and silver, but many original pieces were looted. Today, Machu Picchu is one of Peru's most visited tourist attractions and one of the most famous places in all Latin America, attracting thousands of visitors from all over the world. Besides the charm of the Inca city, the nature of its surroundings also stands out for its beauty, creating an unforgettable scenery for all its visitors. Christ the Redeemer is Rio de Janeiro's #1 postcard. While also being one of the major symbols of Brazil, it's one of the country's most visited tourist spots, welcoming about 1 million visitors a year. Since 2007, this majestic and beautiful monument has been part of the 7 wonders of the modern world. This is Christ's 3rd largest statue in the world and possibly the most popular. There are only 2 larger than the Carioca monument, the statue of Christ the King in Poland and that of Cristo de la Concordia in Bolivia, but none are located in a place as stunning as Rio. Christ the Redeemer is found in Tijuca National Park, part of the Corcovado Hill in the district of Santa Teresa, 709 meters above sea level. This monument is a symbol of Christianity, and it depicts Jesus Christ with his arms outstretched, in a position that resembles the shape of a cross. He wears a long cloak, which extends over his whole body, covering his bare feet, and in the center of his chest is a heart. Historically, the idea of building a Christian statue on Corcovado Hill came from Father Pedro Maria Boss in 1850, but the project did not go forward due to political reasons. Still, in 1920, the Catholic Circle of Rio de Janeiro picked up this idea again, and it started to mobilize to raise public money to begin construction. Little by little, the planning for the creation of Christ the Redeemer came to life. The monument started to be built in 1922, and its construction lasted 9 years. The inauguration happened on October 12, 1931, the day of Our Lady of Aparecida, Brazil's patroness. The French sculptor Paul Landowski Maximilian, Hector de Silva Costa, and the renowned French engineer Albert Cacotte were involved in its construction. The materials used were soapstone and reinforced concrete. Its measurements attract attention. The statue is 30 meters high, has an 8-meter pedestal, the arms are 28 meters long, and each hand measures 3 meters long. The heart, located below the neck in the middle of the chest, is 1.3 meters long. It weighs 635 tons. Regarding its construction, its hands were created by Landowski, and the statue's head was made by Gheorghe Leonida. And these 2 parts were created in Paris, capital of France, and the rest was made in Brazil. The artistic style is Art Deco, which appeared in Europe in 1910 and has been part in painting, architecture, fashion, cinema, and other artistic manifestations since. The structure of Christ the Redeemer was conceived to withstand deeply strong winds of up to 250 kilometers per hour. Accessing Christ the Redeemer can be done in different ways: private transportation, trains, or vans. Besides the beauty of the monument, since it is located in a high point of the city, from above it is possible to encounter a beautiful view, allowing the visitors to contemplate several points of Rio de Janeiro, such as Maracanã Stadium, Ipanema Beach, and Sugarloaf, among other gorgeous landscapes. Besides the statue and the privileged view, there is a chapel inside the pedestal. Inside it, there is a hollow part, with a staircase forbidden to visitors, which give access to the statue's arms and head. Since its inauguration, Christ the Redeemer has gone through some restorations. One reason that has made this monument in need of renovation on more than one occasion is the fact that it is often struck by lightning. This has already caused much damage to its structure. Over time, Christ the Redeemer has served as an inspiration to many artists. Many lyrics mention him. Many famous people have visited the monument. For instance, Princess Diana, Barack Obama, Pope John Paul II, and the Dalai Lama. In some historical moments or specific situations, the monument acquires personalized lighting, like during the 2014 World Cup, when Christ was illuminated with the colors of the flags of the event's participating countries. Although it is one of the world's most famous monuments, few know that the Taj Mahal is actually a funeral building. It is a mausoleum and one of the major reasons to visit northern India. Built in the city of Agra between 1632 and 1653, this white marble pearl is based on one of the most beautiful love stories. Its construction was ordered by Emperor Shah Jahan, the fifth of the Mughal dynasty. When he was only 16, in 1607, the then called Prince Khurram met Arjuman Banu Begum, a girl whose aunt was the wife of Khurram's father. The love between them was immediately felt, but the marriage took place only 5 years later, in 1612. The prince baptized his wife Mumtaz Mahal, the chosen one of the palace, in English. Beautiful and jovial, her personality was also warm and a source of pride for the people. Mumtaz took care of widows and orphans, ensuring their livelihood. Her maternal gift would eventually be fatal. The princess died after the birth of her 14th child, a girl, on June 17, 1631. The desperation and mourning of the now Emperor Shah Jahan, who had reached the top of the hierarchy 3 years ago, were witnessed by many. The reports of the time state that the widower cried non-stop for 8 days, and at the end of that period, his hair turned white. In December 1631, after defeating a military rival, a decision had materialized in his mind to honor his wife. Shah Jahan ordered Mumtaz's body to be exhumed from her grave in Burbanpur and transferred to Agra, 700 kilometers away. This procession was accompanied by thousands of soldiers and ended with the placing of the body on land where the Taj Mahal would be built. Shah Jahan wanted to build the most magnificent mausoleum ever seen. He himself outlined the construction plans with the help of the most important architects of the time. Money was no problem. The Mughal Empire had endless wealth. This made it possible not only to build a grand monument, but also to complete the works in record time. 20,000 workers were gathered, who quickly began to structure the foundations of the entire complex. The marble needed for the construction was brought from Makrana, 320 kilometers away, by 1,000 elephants and countless oxen. The Taj Mahal is not only a building, but a complex of several structures. Besides the tomb, there is also a mosque. Islam was the religion of the Mughal Empire, a guest house, 4 minarets, and several gardens. The level of ornamentation detail is very intricate. There are several passages of the Quran inculcated in black marble, semi-precious stones, details in gold thread. Shah Jahan died in 1666 after more than 30 years as emperor, a period that ended with the usurpation of the throne by one of his sons. His body was placed in the crypt below the Taj Mahal. On the main floor of the structure, we can find 2 cenotaphs, symbolizing the union between Shah Jahan and Mumtaz. Today, and after the lootings perpetrated by the British in the 19th century when they ruled India, the Taj Mahal welcomes 2.5 million visitors per year and was elected in 1983 as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The best option for those who want to get to know the Taj Mahal is to opt for guided tours, which, when booked in advance, allow for shorter waiting times, something very useful especially when temperatures are higher in the hot season in the Northern Hemisphere, May-October. It is also recommended to wear comfortable clothing, especially footwear, which will have to be removed when entering the mosque. No eating or smoking is allowed. Like any busy area with a high number of tourists, it is necessary to be careful with personal belongings. The best time to visit is between 7 a.m. and 10 a.m. when there are fewer visitors. If possible, we recommend spending a few hours in the complex to witness how the marble changes its color depending on sunlight. Once a month, it is also possible to visit the Taj Mahal on a full moon night to observe the brightness of this monument under the lunar intensity. The Taj Mahal's importance is not limited only to its architectural splendor or to the idyllic setting it evokes. Its greatest asset is to materialize the duplicity of life, the light of love and the darkness of death, both gathered in an iconic building where tragedy and joy live side by side. The Coliseum, also known as the Flavian Amphitheater, is in Rome, the capital of Italy. It is one of the most famous historical monuments in the world and one of the most renowned and visited tourist spots in Italy. Besides being one of the 7 wonders of the modern world, it is considered by UNESCO a World Heritage Site. The Colosseum was built in the 1st century for 6 years. The beginning of its history is associated with the Flavian dynasty. The construction took place during the regency of the emperors of that dynasty. That is why its initial name was Flavian Amphitheater. The word Colosseum came into use only from the 8th century onwards. The work began in 72 AD at the behest of Emperor Vespasian and was completed in 90 AD. During the government of Titus Flavius Domitian, the Colosseum underwent some modifications. The main materials used in the construction were marble, travertine stone, tuff, and tile. Initially, the Colosseum had a capacity of 50,000 people on 3 floors. The bleachers were made of marble, divided according to the social class of the audience. But the emperors Severus Alexander and Gordian II enlarged the structure, building a 4th floor. From then on, the place began to welcome up to 90,000 spectators. When the Colosseum was inaugurated in 80 AD, there were several presentations that lasted 100 days. Initially, the amphitheater was especially used for the munera, which were gladiatorial battles. They fought amongst themselves or against animals. This practice was an important source of entertainment for the Romans and symbolized the first performances on site. In addition, the Colosseum was also used for other shows. For example, hunting wild animals from the African continent. In these shows, it was common to use lions, leopards, crocodiles, elephants, and others. Another interesting spectacle was the naumachies, i.e., representations of naval battles. The sets were flooded for the staging. This happened at least once in the Colosseum. Mythological representations were also made, marked by brutal battles. Another striking aspect is that the performances in the amphitheater used to elaborate sceneries to stimulate different environments. They were made by various professionals, such as painters and architects. This detail added great realism to the spectacles. The deaths during these performances were frequent. One of the engineering details of this amphitheater was the use of sand, which was placed in the wooden floor of the stage to absorb the frequently spilled blood. However, human deaths were prohibited from 404 onwards. However, all the shows stopped happening during the Middle Ages. After that period, the venue started to be used for other purposes. As the years went by, construction was hit by earthquakes that caused damage. Historically, the Colosseum was also plundered several times, especially in the 15th and 16th centuries, another factor that affected its original structure. Today, because of these events, The imposing building is in ruins. With the passing of time, several restorations were made. Some of the most important were ordered by the Popes Gregory XVI and Pius IX, and also during the reign of Valentinian III. Today, even in ruins, this famous building still maintains an important part of its structure. Visitors can contemplate the splendor and grandeur of the Coliseum, one of the greatest architectural symbols of the Roman Empire. The Moscow Kremlin is a multi-dwelling compound situated in the center of the Russian capital, currently the residence of the country's president. The word Kremlin means fortress within a city, or simply fortress. There are nearly 20 Kremlins scattered across the vast Russian territory, but the Moscow complex is the most well-known. With its varied colors on the facade, circular forms, arches, magnificence, exotic architectural design, and historical role, this Kremlin has over time become a world-renowned site. In 1990, it was declared a World Heritage Site, and now it is a true tourist hub that lures visitors from all over the world. Moscow Kremlin's history got its start in the year 1156, when Prince Yuri Dolgoruki demanded the construction of the complex, seeking to protect the city from possible attacks. Subsequently, Moscow was overrun by the Mongols, who brought destruction to the fortress. But in 1336, the Kremlin was rebuilt by the order of Prince Ivan Kalita. Oak wood was used for the structure's walls during the process. Later, in 1365, these were burned to the ground during a fire. From the following year until 1368, these walls were rebuilt with limestone, commissioned by the Grand Prince of Moscow, Dmitrius Donsky. During the reign of Ivan III, this structure was further enhanced, and the ruler hired Italian architects to build new premises. 3 churches, among other buildings, were built during his reign. During this time, a celebrated building called Ivan III's Bell Tower was also built. Designed by Marco Bono, with the tallest tower in the Kremlin, which is 81 meters high, and one of the most striking features of the fortification to this day. The Kremlin was used as a residence by the Tsars until the country's capital was moved to St. Petersburg. Subsequently, however, when the October Revolution took place, Moscow became Russia's capital again, and the Kremlin was once again the seat of the government. Throughout this period, further changes were made in the complex's structure. Throughout its history, the Kremlin underwent several attacks. For instance, the Kremlin was a target of a Polish invasion in 1612. It was also the target of French Napoleon Bonaparte's troops when they invaded the city of Moscow in 1812. The Napoleonic military razed 6 towers, which were later rebuilt. And then, in 1917, Russian soldiers and workers also stormed the Kremlin. The Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, and since then, the Moscow Kremlin has become the residence of Russian presidents. Museums were established in the complex in 1961. These have become important tourist attractions and house historically significant relics such as the Monomakh crown, a scepter of Alexandra Fyodorovna, the wife of Tsar Nicholas II, and the dress she wore at her coronation. Fascinating historical pieces can be found in the Arsenal Palace, such as a throne made of diamonds that was received by Tsar Alexius, the wedding dress worn by Catherine the Great, among other relics. The site is also home to historic buildings and churches. The Kremlin's numbers are quite impressive. Its wall is 2,500 meters long, and its height ranges from 5 to 19 meters. However, the total area of the Kremlin is 27.7 hectares. Furthermore, there are now 20 towers arranged in the complex, the highest of which is Troitskaya, with 80 meters, featuring the star at its end. Its construction took place in the mid-1490s, and the one responsible for it was a talented Italian architect. A prominent feature of the complex is the famous Tsar's Bell, located in Ivan's Bell Tower. The bell weighs 202 tons and is over 6 meters high. Due to these measurements, it is said to be the largest bell in the world. The 400-year-old Tsar cannon is the world's largest cannon. It weighs 40 tons, and each cannonball it fires weighs 800 kilograms. The other very impressive site in the complex is the Church of St. Michael the Archangel. built between the years 1505 and 1508 on the same site as an old cathedral. The influence of the Renaissance architecture can be seen in this church, which boasts beautiful frescoes. Inside, there are 54 tombs and 46 tombstones, containing some of the most important figures in Russian history. The Church of St. Michael the Archangel is in the cathedral square, the site where coronations and funerals of Tsars and other important personalities took place. It was also where other religious institutions and the most important churches of the entire city of Moscow are located, such as the Cathedral Dormition and the Cathedral of Annunciation, the two largest in the entire fortress. Some of the most important figures in all of Russian history are also buried in the Kremlin, such as the communist politician Vladimir Lenin, the ruler Joseph Stalin, the well-known astronaut Yuri Gagarin, who was the first man to travel into space, and many others. Other than the points mentioned, the fortification is also home to many palaces, such as the Terem Palace, which used to be the residence of Russian Tsars, the Palace of Facets, the Amusement Palace, and others. One highlight is the Great Kremlin Palace, nestled in the southwestern part of the fortification, the official residence of the President of Russia. Formerly, before it served this purpose, this very site had chambers and residences that were occupied by Tsars and Grand Dukes. Unlike what many tend to believe, the famous St. Basil's Cathedral, with its colorful and striking architecture, is not part of the Kremlin complex. The cathedral is found next to the Kremlin on Red Square. Built in 1561, the cathedral marks the geographic center of the city of Moscow, the center of power and strength, characterized by an exotic, majestic, stately, and impressive architectural style. The Kremlin is Russia's main postcard and holds huge importance in the country's history. As well as sheltering past relics, the Kremlin has been the stage for many important events, and many noteworthy personalities who have marked the history of Russia have also spent time there. The Imperial Palace of China lies in the center of the ancient city of Beijing, the country's capital, and is one of the most important places in Chinese history. Besides having an outstanding architecture, it was also the country's political center for a long time, symbolizing the power and sovereignty of the Chinese emperors. They resided there from the Ming Dynasty until the Qing Dynasty in 1911. This is exactly why the complex city is known as the Forbidden City, since only the emperor, his family, and a few employees or other appointed officials had access to it. However, these restrictions have now changed, and the Forbidden City can be visited. It is one of the most attractive places for visitors to the Chinese capital. The Imperial Palace of China was first built in 1406 when the third monarch of the Ming Dynasty, Yongle, was emperor. The fortress had 1 million workers involved in its construction, but only finished after 14 years. Upon its completion, a colossal complex of 720,000 square meters and 800 buildings emerged, while just over 8,000 rooms spread over the vast complex. It was a true city located inside another, meant only for the emperor, his family, officials, and a few other people. In total, 24 Chinese emperors lived there. Its architecture and ornamentation are especially impressive and lavish. The foundation for the palace construction was feng shui, or feng shui in Mandarin, a classical Chinese millennial art that, among other aspects, strives for harmonizing the surroundings. One curious aspect is that the design of the Forbidden City represents the universe. In honor of the sun, its main buildings are turned south. Another mythological reference is reflected in the construction of the Forbidden City. The story goes that the deities would inhabit a building composed of a total of 10,000 rooms, and for this reason, the Forbidden City would have 9,999 rooms, so that men would not be equal to the gods. After the construction was finished, the Great Palace was sealed off. No one was allowed to enter the complex, and a great protection was put up around it. A huge wall, 3.4 kilometers long and 10 meters high, was built to protect the palace. Also, for protection, a water-filled moat 52 meters wide was built around the palace. Consequently, for 5 centuries, with all this care and some limitations, the Forbidden City served as the home of the Chinese emperors. The complex continued to be inaccessible, unknown, and restricted to the population. However, in 1911, the situation began to change. It was during this time that the Chinese Revolution took place. Later, in 1925, the ancient tradition of the place changed. On October 10th of that year, the world-famous Imperial Palace was turned into a museum and finally opened to the public. It has since become a place that enthralls people from all over the world and is one of the top tourist spots in all of China. Nevertheless, there was a threat to the treasures of the site in 1933. Due to the Second Sino-Japanese War, the artifacts of the Forbidden City were moved out of the site, first to Nanjing, and then to Shanghai. However, the city came under threat, and once again, the objects were evacuated, this time in 3 different batches sent to different locations. Ultimately, after great efforts by the Chinese government to protect these historical assets, the pieces arrived safely in Sichuan, or Sichuan in Mandarin. The Japanese broke in and took the Forbidden City, but did not cause any significant damage to the site. Even with these difficulties, and with all the uncertainty and danger brought by World War II, the artifacts were saved and well preserved. Some of the many rooms in this massive complex stand out. One is the famous Hall of Imperial Peace, an area dedicated to the water goddess Xuan Wu. There is also the Hall of Supreme Harmony, seated in front of a large square, especially important for ceremonies and audiences. This is where you will find the famous Dragon Throne, where the emperor would sit and announce his decisions. Another important room is the Ceramics Gallery, with a total of 429 pieces of ceramics, which formerly served as a collection of writings known as the Hall of Literary Glory. There is also the splendid Special Garden, a gorgeous place surrounded by trees and flowers, especially designed for relaxing moments. There is also the Palace of Heavenly Purity, where for a time the emperor and empress lived. A throne has been preserved and kept at the site. The Imperial Palace Museum is another important room, as it houses more than 1 million cultural relics. In 1987, due to its historical and cultural importance, the Forbidden City was declared a World Heritage Site. Today, the massive palace can welcome up to 50,000 visitors per day, making it one of the most visited places in China. While there are many magnificent and famous castles scattered around German territory, one of the most outstanding is certainly Neuschwanstein Castle, near Füssen, Munich, and Hohenschwangau, towns in southwestern Bavaria close to the Austrian border. This castle became particularly well known for serving the inspiration of Walt Disney's Sleeping Beauty and Cinderella castles, and over time, Neuschwanstein has inspired anime and game shows. This gorgeous castle's history begins with Ludwig II, the Mad King of Bavaria. This ruler was different from most. He despised public and social gatherings and dreamt of living in a beautiful, remote place. Ludwig II then came across the perfect place to build his dream castle. The king wrote that this location was the most beautiful one could find, and that it was sacred and inaccessible. On September 5, 1869, his long-awaited project took shape on the ruins of an ancient medieval fortress. Christian Jank, who was a theater set designer, was responsible for designing the whole site. He was the ideal person to give the complex a wonderful style. Architects Edward Riedel, George Dolman, and Leo von Klenze were also involved and in charge of the works. When the Mad King's castle was built, castles were no longer needed or used to be built in Germany. In fact, Neuschwanstein features some very modern details for its time, such as the presence of a telephone line, hot and cold water, electric light, and other technological devices. Once the works were completed, the castle was initially named New Castle Hohenschwangau. However, after the Mad King's death, it was renamed Neuschwanstein, as it is known to this day, meaning Castle of the Swan Knight. This name was inspired by a Richard Wagner opera. Neuschwanstein boasts a wonderful structure, whose fantasy aura matches Ludwig II's countenance, mingled with medieval features. It is surrounded by a stunning natural landscape, shaped by lakes and green mountains that enhance its architectural beauty. The impressive structure is 80 meters high and covers an area of 6,000 square meters. The enormous castle houses a total of more than 200 rooms inside. Many of the walls have images alluding to legends cited in Richard Wagner's operas, of whom Ludwig was a friend and admirer. The castle's interior, besides all the grandeur of its external architecture, is also breathtaking. The Hall of Thrones is one of the most amazing chambers, with a sumptuous decorative style, consisting of 2 floors and 15 meters high. Its walls are embellished with many precious stones and an image depicting Jesus, the 12 apostles, and angelic figures. The colors blue and gold prevail, the latter in the walls and details of the setting, providing an impressive atmosphere. Interestingly enough, despite the room's name, there is no throne there, as the king died before it was completed. The Singers' Hall is yet another significant spot in the castle. It was one of King Ludwig II's favorite parts. It was meant to host presentations by musicians and playwrights, as rumor has it. This enormous room, built for composer Richard Wagner, which spans the entire 4th floor, contains several paintings depicting the legend of the Arthurian knight Parsifal and the quest for the Holy Grail. The gold chandeliers are also striking and enhance the luxurious surroundings. King Louis II's bedroom is another highlight of the Neuschwanstein Castle, a luxurious chamber with striking details. The bed, in neo-Gothic style and carved in wood, was handmade and is among the items that draw most attention for its ornamental minutiae. Its walls are beautifully decorated with paintings of Tristan and Isolde. Another is a sink with a swan-shaped faucet, a reference to the opera Lohengrin. Other swan-shaped ornaments can be found in this room. The castle is also home to an artificial grotto, embellished by a waterfall and colored lighting. Apart from this, there is an oratory, a dining room, a cabinet, and many other rooms scattered throughout the world's most wondrous castle. Nevertheless, the king was hardly able to enjoy his wonderful and envisioned castle. In 1886, shortly before the completion of the complex's works, a panel of psychiatrists diagnosed and stated in an official report that the ruler Ludwig II suffered from paranoia. Owing to his critical mental health condition, he was imprisoned and relocated. Not long after, he was found mysteriously dead at Lake Starnberg. The castle was not even fully completed at the time of this tragedy. But within weeks of his death, after 20 years of construction, the castle was opened for visitors. Once the work was finished, a fairy tale castle was born. It has since attracted people from all corners of the world, becoming one of Germany's most important tourist attractions. It welcomes about 10,000 visitors daily and is one of Europe's most exciting destinations. It is reportedly the most photographed spot in Germany. Big Ben, the alias for the official name Great Bell, stands in a neo-Gothic style building. It is London's greatest tourist landmark, as well as one of Europe's main postcards. Nearly everyone knows the image, which constantly appears in books, magazines, movies, and TV shows. The world-famous bell was built at the Palace of Westminster in 1859 in central London. While Big Ben is originally the bell's name, people often refer to the Great Clock as a whole when they talk about it. 2 different versions may explain the name. One claims that Big Ben was the moniker of a boxer named Benjamin Count, a big, stocky man who weighed 400 pounds. The other version says that there was once a parliamentary meeting to choose the name of the watch. On this occasion, a man named Sir Benjamin Hall, the first Baron of Landover, a tall, large figure whose nickname was Big Ben, made a speech. One parliamentarian was inspired by him, saying that this moniker should be given to the watch. In both cases, anyway, the word Ben would be an abbreviation of the name Benjamin. Big Ben is housed atop a tower in the Abbey, which was called the Clock Tower until 2012 and has now been renamed the Elizabeth Tower. The bell weighs 13 tons and is the world's third largest clock, while certainly being the most famous. Its hands measure 2.7 and 4.7 meters. The clock has 4 faces and is the world's second largest 4-sided clock, second only to the Minneapolis City Hall clock in the United States of America. The base of the clock has Domine salvam fac reginam nostram victoriam primum, written in Latin, which means, Lord, keep our Queen Victoria first safe. This inscription refers to Queen Victoria, the monarch at the time the big well was built. There is a long stairway inside, comprising 334 steps that lead up to the tower's top. The bell was crafted in the English capital in 1858 by a foundry company called Whitechapel Bell Foundry, founded in 1570 and terminated in 2017. Its structure was inspired by the wish to make innovations in the Palace of Westminster, where it stands. There had been a fire there in 1834, so the idea of renovating the part of the building that was not destroyed was born. Charles Barry was the project's architect, and Edmund Beckett Dennison was initially responsible for the design, but his technique was not sufficiently adequate. The bell broke after it was ready. The fragments were handed over to a man named George Mears, whose name is written on the bell and who owned Whitechapel Bell Foundry. He undertook the design and then brought the bell to life, which was approved by Dennison himself. The melting metal took 20 minutes to fill the mold in the casting process. A total of 20 days was spent solidifying in the mold. Once all this process was completed, the bell was brought from the factory to Parliament, transported by a 16-horse carriage. While the bell was in transit, some roads had to be closed, and a public holiday was introduced on that day. This was certainly a historic moment for the City of London. It has rung every hour since then. And, besides the celebrated Big Ben, there are smaller bells that ring every 15 minutes at the Elizabeth Tower. The first time the bell rang was on July the 11th, 1859, 11 days after the clock tower was unveiled. Any structure or historical object always holds its stories. Some curious events have already happened at Big Ben. On one occasion, the clock was set back 5 minutes because birds landed on its hand. There have been 2 special instances in which the striking of the clock was different. The first dates back to February the 15th, 1952, when the clock struck an incredible 56 times during the funeral of King George VI, who died at the age of 56. In 2012, on July the 27th, it rang for 3 minutes to herald the opening of the Summer Olympics that year. Since July the 11th, 1859, when it first rang, the chimes of the bell have been broadcast daily by BBC Radio. In 1962, at the turn of the year, Big Ben was delayed by 10 minutes. But, despite this event, the clock is quite accurate and one of the culprits of the British citizens' reputation for punctuality. Twice the clock has stopped ticking. The first was during the First World War, and the second, in the year 2017, during a repair. In World War II, despite all the strain England was under, the clock continued to strike normally, although the lights were turned off. The Big Ben attracts thousands of tourists to its surroundings every day, who come eager to catch its famous chimes. Edinburgh Castle is a former fortress standing on Castle Hill in the old city of Edinburgh, Scotland's capital city. The fortress was built on top of an extinct volcano, which was likely active about 340 million years ago. Its boulder, known as Castle Rock, stands 120 meters above sea level. The castle is supposed to have been first inhabited in the 2nd century AD. Old writings by the Greek Ptolemy apparently refer to the site. According to an English chronicler, Abracus, king of the Britons, is said to have been its founder. There is another writer who claims that Abracus built a castle, but while these accounts are important, it remains unclear whether these references in fact refer to the actual Edinburgh Castle construction. Evidence suggests that the occupation of the fortress dates back to the early Bronze Age or late Iron Age. There is also the archaeological evidence that the site was inhabited in the 1st and 2nd century after Christ. The castle is enormous. Those who wish to see its rooms will have to spend a good number of hours walking around. Certain parts of Edinburgh Castle are particularly interesting and attract tourist eyes for their beauty and history. One such famous point is St. Margaret's Chapel, built in 1130, built of stones and rectangular in shape, bearing a Norman-style architecture. It was reportedly built in the early 12th century by St. Margaret's fourth son, serving as a private chapel for the royal family. Bon Smog is the name of a cannon housed in the chapel's outer part. It was built in 1449 at the request of Philip III, who gave it as a gift to King James II. It weighs 6 tons. During a holiday in 1558, a 150-kilogram stone bullet was shot from the cannon, hitting the Royal Botanical Gardens, just lie over 2 miles from the fortress. We also have Crown Square, established in the 15th century. From here, you can see several points of the fortress's stunning architecture, the military prisons, and other important landmarks. Edinburgh Castle is also an important facility for housing the Scottish crown jewels, including ancient and historically significant pieces such as the crown, scepter, and sword. These are on display in an area called the Crown Room, in which is also the Stone of Scone, also known as the Coronation Stone. This artifact is especially significant in Scottish history for having been used for the coronation of all the country's monarchs. It was later used in the coronation of the English kings. Queen Elizabeth II was one of the monarchs crowned at the Stone of Scone. Legends abound about the Stone of Scone, considered to be a sacred object. As it is also important for English history, it was kept in a period in Westminster Abbey, London, until it was moved back to Scotland. Other highlights include the National War Museum, the prisons, and the National War Memorial. There is also the Great Hall, in which armor and weapons are displayed, and where dances and dinners were once held. Its structure was completed in 1511 during James IV's reign. The building is also located in the castle's central area. Each August, a famous military event called the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo, which began in 1950, is held on the castle esplanade. At first, the event was attended by Scottish military bands, but the festival now includes military bands from other parts of the world. Over time, the Royal Edinburgh Military Tattoo has become increasingly popular and is currently a genuine tourist attraction in Scotland. The event also features music, especially played with harmonica and drums, as well as a beautiful lighting display. Crowds flock to this military event every year. A further significant fact in Edinburgh's castle history is that, except for Sundays, the Artillery General fires a shot every day at 1 p.m., in keeping with a tradition since 1861. The firing event at the castle always draws a crowd of tourists. Back in the day, this firing would be done so that ships passing through the region could reset their watches. The castle is considered to be one of the world's most haunted. There are many reports of ghosts and photos that allegedly show apparitions. Edinburgh Castle is home to and embodies an important part of Scotland's history for these and other reasons. Edinburgh Castle is one of the most widely popular sites among tourists visiting Scotland. It is the second most visited tourist spot in the entire country, welcoming approximately 1 million tourists per year. On top of that, this is certainly one of the most famous castles in the entire United Kingdom. The Statue of Liberty is one of the United States of America's primary landmarks. It is a neoclassical sculpture located in New York City and known all over the world. It stands in the harbor of a small island called Liberty Island. In 1984, due to its importance and being considered an architectural masterpiece, the statue was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The Statue of Liberty, whose official name is Liberty Enlightening the World, was given to the United States as a gift from Napoleon III, the first president of the Second French Republic. The gesture was made to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the independence of the United States of America in 1776, which is why it symbolizes freedom, democracy, and hope. The monument was designed by a French sculptor named Frédéric Auguste Bartholdi and designed by Eugene Emmanuel Viollet Leduc and engineer Alexandre Gustave Eiffel, who was also in charge of designing the famous Eiffel Tower. Steel, cast iron, copper, and cement were used in its construction. Many people worked on the statue's development. The work routine was hard, as workers spent 10 hours every day of the week dedicated to the building. It was difficult to get financial support for the project, and Bartholdi had to undertake his own initiatives, such as organizing shows, to raise the money needed. In 1876, Bartholdi hosted a torchlight display of the statue in Philadelphia. This event, besides being well received by the public, helped him raise money to continue the work. The statue began to be made in France in 1870, but it was not completed until 1884 and arrived in the United States only in 1885. To be shipped, it had to be disassembled into 350 pieces, which were packed in a total of 214 boxes. The construction of the monument's base was completed in April 1886. This support was made in the USA itself. After its completion, 4 months in total were needed for the statue to be assembled on it. The unveiling of the colossal Statue of Liberty took place on October the 23rd, 1886. This milestone monument was attended by thousands of people, including Grover Cleveland, the President of the United States at the time, who was certain to participate in this historic moment for his nation. After the unveiling, the statue served for a time as a lighthouse, and historically was the first lighthouse to use electric power. As for its features, the sculpture displays a woman, the Roman goddess Libertas, symbol of freedom. The statue's face is said to have been inspired by Bartholdi's mother, while the statue's body was inspired by his wife. Its right arm is extended above its head, and its hand holds a torch, while the other hand holds a board on which is inscribed in Roman numerals the date of July 4th, 1776, when the United States Declaration of Independence was issued. Interestingly, the left hand holding a tablet and the torch held by the other hand are Masonic allusions proposed by Bartholdi, who was a Freemason. On the head of the statue, there is a crown with a set of 25 windows that refer to the gemstones found in the USA. And there are also 7 rays that refer to the 7 continents and the 7 seas of the world. Its height is 92.9 meters, of which 46.9 are the height of the base and 46 meters the height of the statue itself, the equivalent of a 22-story building. To get to the top, you have to climb a 354-step staircase, and there are 215 steps up to the pedestal. The index finger is 2.5 meters long, and its nose measures 1.37 meters. On the top of these measurements, the statue weighs an incredible 225 tons and entered the Guinness Book of Records as the planet's heaviest sculpture. Perhaps a detail that many are unaware of is that at the foot of the statue, there is a bronze plaque on which is written a sonnet called The New Colossus, written in 1833 by the poet Emma Lazarus to raise funds for the construction of the statue's base. Although the color of the statue is somewhat greenish today, this was not always the case. The original color was reddish-brown. The color change is a result of the action of time, wind, rain, and pollution. Since its inauguration, several restorations have been made to the statue for preservation purposes. In 1986, the statue's centennial year, the entire monument was cleaned, and the crown was exchanged because the original one was worn away. Besides this, other changes and damage have occurred over time. One of the most striking was when an attack was made by the Germans during the First World War, damaging the torch and also another part of the statue. Due to this event, the statue now has a new torch that is gold-plated and lit up at night. Visitors were allowed to climb up to the statue's torch for some years, but that is not permitted nowadays. But this detail does not prevent thousands of tourists from visiting the monument, which can be seen up close when people take a boat or ferry to the island on which the statue stands. Alternatively, it can simply be seen from afar, from other points in the city. The annual number of visitors is between 3 and 4 million. The Statue of Liberty is a major symbol for Americans. It is the country's main postcard and is known around the globe. There are even some replicas in countries such as Japan, France, and Brazil. Besides its remarkable historical and cultural value, the statue also has a huge tourist appeal. attracting thousands of visitors every year and being the most visited place in New York. As a country, France has many well-known sites and historical places, but among them, the Eiffel Tower is surely the one that stands out the most. It attracts millions of visitors every year and has become the country's main symbol. Located in a green area known as the Champ de Mars, the Eiffel Tower is the tallest building in the entire Parisian city. This alone makes it stand out, drawing the attention of people wandering through the city streets, who can see it and admire it from different spots in Paris. The Exposition Universelle took place in Paris in 1889, and to celebrate the occasion, a competition was arranged for a temporary structure on the Champ de Mars square to serve as the exhibition entrance. In all, 107 different designs were submitted. The one that stood out was that of engineer Gustave Eiffel, who was already achieving recognition for the construction of railways and astronomical observatories. This project also involved the engineers Maurice Coquelin and Émile Nouguet, and the architect Stephen Sauvestre. The two engineers, Maurice and Émile, pitched an early idea to Eiffel, but he did not think this draft was ideal. That was when Stephen Sauvestre stepped in. He expanded on the ideas proposed by the two engineers, adding new aspects to the monument, such as arches at the base, a glass pavilion on the second floor, and other details. After adding these, Gustave Eiffel felt that he really had a promising project on his hands and that construction should begin. However, there is an interesting detail in the construction history of this famous monument. Although Eiffel's project had been created and got approval to be implemented, there were also people who criticized the idea. In 1887, a French newspaper called Le Temps established a letter in which a group of artists from many different fields criticized the tower project and even called it a monster, claiming that it was ridiculous. One of the artists who criticized it was the famous poet Verlaine, who called it a skeleton. Notwithstanding the warnings and disapproval of so many artists, the project started to be put into practice in 1887. 2 years of constructive work followed. Its structure is composed of 2.5 million bolts and more than 15,000 pieces of iron. The tower's second floor was completed in April 1888, and the second floor in August of the same year. But the work was only finished on March 31st, 1889, the date of its inauguration, when the centennial of a very important historical event, the French Revolution, was celebrated. On that day, Gustave Eiffel ascended the monument's highest step, planted a flag on its top, and was presented with a Legion of Honor medal. Plans initially were that the Eiffel Tower would be commercially managed for 20 years. After that period, it would be demolished. But engineer Gustave Eiffel worked hard to prevent the monument from being torn down, trying to prove that the tower could be used for scientific purposes. Luckily, it was not destroyed as it was now used as a radio broadcasting antenna. The tower is 324 meters high, equivalent to a 10-story building. For a long time, it was considered the world's tallest monument. However, this position was lost in 1930 with the construction of the Chrysler Building in New York with a height of 329 meters. Interestingly enough, in the summer, due to iron dilation, the tower becomes 15 centimeters taller. Its staircase consists of more than 1,600 steps, but an elevator is available to save tourists from having to walk up so many steps. Furthermore, the monument weighs more than 10,000 tons. These figures prove just how colossal the tower is. Due to its sheer size, 60 tons of paint are used when it needs to be painted, something that happens every 7 years. Apart from all the greatness and architectural splendor, some interesting details are part of the structure. One of them is Gustave Eiffel's private apartment, which lies at the top of the tower, 300 meters above the ground. The place is simple and small, but quite comfortable. Over time, many people attempted to rent this facility, but the engineer did not accept any offers and made personal use of his apartment. Eiffel even received a visit from his illustrious friend, Thomas Edison, in his secret room. This meeting took place on September 10, 1899. Today, visitors can see part of the apartment through glass. When they look into the space, they find two mannequins representing Edison and Eiffel. The Eiffel Tower is the world's most visited paid monument and attracts approximately 7 million tourists every year. Visitors can access it from 3 floors, where they find restaurants, stores, and a breathtaking view of the French capital. The famous metallic structure in Paris has replicas scattered in other countries around the world, such as the United States, Bolivia, Russia, and a few others. Aside from its tourist and economic relevance, the Eiffel Tower has tremendous historical and cultural value, as it is one of the world's most elegant and colossal architectural monuments.